Our disability is our greatest strength. It gives us a supervision to see the issues facing humanity from a more inclusive perspective and the grit to fight back against all odds. Welcome to Super Adaptables, the More Than Walking video podcast discussion. Welcome to Super Adaptables, the podcast where people of all abilities gather to discuss pressing issues that affect the disability community and the implications for the world at large. We're your host. I am Corey Pheez, C4 complete quadriplegic since 2005.
And I'm Jonathan Sigworth, C7 complete quadriplegic since 2006, both of us hailing from the great state of Connecticut.
Yes, sir. We are recording this on Thursday, the 23rd of October, 2025. And in a little bit, we'll be discussing with some experts about Social Security, an expert overview.
And just as a reminder, Super Adaptables is made possible in part by a grant from the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation's National Paralysis Resource Center. The information provided and opinions expressed in these podcasts do not necessarily reflect the views of the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. For more information about the Foundation's National Paralysis Resource Center, visit www.christopherreeve.org. Also, I should note that the views expressed on this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of More Than Walking either, but belong to us as individual speakers.
Indeed, indeed.
And with that, we would like to welcome back one of our previous guests, as well as introduce two others. Heather Miller, who is joining us not from Nebraska, as she usually is, but
No,
Virginia, right?
Yeah, I'm in Leesburg, Virginia today. Got into DC last night.
Yeah, and Heather is a certified benefits counselor at Spinalpedia, which is partnered with More Than Walking, and through that partnership, we provide one-on-one peer navigation for people with spinal cord injuries and disabilities in general who are looking to get back to employment, navigating the world of benefits, and pursue employment and other life activities without losing access to essential supports like healthcare and SSDI and SSI. So thank you so much for being here, Heather.
Absolutely.
Definitely appreciate you. I'd like to also introduce Eva Sermon, CAE. She has served as the Executive Director of the National Association of Disability Representatives, or NADR, since 2010. Prior to this role, she was an eligible direct pay non-attorney, or EDPNA, representative advocating for Social Security disability claimants. Eva holds a Bachelor of Business Administration degree from Baylor University and is a certified association executive. With more than a decade of leadership in nonprofit management and disability representation, she is dedicated to supporting NADR's mission of advocating the profession and improving the Social Security disability process for claimants and their representatives. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have Ryan Hill, who serves as the Public Policy Advisor for the National Association of Disability Representatives, NADR. She brings nearly 15 years of experience in federal health and social policy, including serving as a healthcare staffer on Capitol Hill for then Congresswoman, now Senator Tammy Duckworth. In her current role, Ryan provides strategic guidance on federal issues impacting the Social Security disability process. She is passionate about helping organizations navigate complex policy changes, engage effectively with Congress and federal agencies, and strengthen systems that support both beneficiaries and professionals. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So just to give you guys a quick overview of what we've been doing. So over the last 10 months, I and John, we've been covering social safety nets and their importance. And we understand that they all serve people differently and from different demographics. Veterans benefits protect service members and their families. Medicaid and Medicare help low-income families, the elderly, and the disabled maintain healthcare coverage. Due process ensures fairness and justice during legal proceedings, among other benefits. But Social Security and other similar programs help to maintain financial stability for those who have paid into the system or have become disabled. And in the case of SSI, individuals with limited resources are protected financially from poverty. And we really want to get into, some of the weeds about Social Security and the other programs that follow, because we know that there's, an important need to understand what's going on about that.
Absolutely.
And Yeah, I mean, we're really honored to speak with you guys today. And, in preparation, Corey and I have been reading the book Social Security for Dummies by Jonathan Peterson,
Wonderful. Good for you.
which has been
That's great.
not sure it's helped make me any smarter. I'm still just as confused
Listen,
as ever.
when Corey referenced the weeds, I was like in my brain, and boy, are there weeds.
Yes, it is a giant program. Yes.
So yeah, but it really does. It tries to lay out everything you need to know about Social Security, and among the various books that I could find, audiobook versions of it, it was the best one that we could find. However, I'm assuming that the majority of Americans, particularly younger adults,
Mhm.
have no idea about, or do not fully understand Social Security's function or how to prepare for benefits. I would I would guess that may also be true for everyone who is applying for it.
Mhm.
But in fact, on Social Security's website, younger adults aged 25 to 45 have the lowest levels of knowledge based on studies conducted in both 2015 and 2017. In this book, it throws around a statistic, something like 25 to 30% of people entering the workforce are going to die or become disabled before they reach retirement age, which that really struck me as surprising. These resources are more relevant than ever. But hopefully after today, we can give people a little better understanding of what this social safety net entails and why it's important to preserve it and improve it. So with that, would love to tackle some of these questions with all of you. Starting with the first one, what is Social Security? Who manages it? And why is it important? Anyone want to take a stab at that one?
Start with that one. And I'd like to weave in a bit of a history lesson, if you'll allow me.
Of course.
So this year, Social Security celebrated 90 years of existence. It was signed into law August 14th. We just celebrated this 90-year anniversary by then President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And when you think about the year that it was signed into law, which was 1935, you have to understand that we were on the heels of the Great Depression, right? The country was in a rebuilding period. And there were so many people who, were still suffering from the financial effects of the Great Depression. But really, the Great Depression really highlighted a lot of the gaps that were in our social safety net as a country and the way that we cared for people who were unable to work for whatever reason or who were retired. So we had, really since the country's existence, we had all the patchwork systems, right? A lot of it was, different religious charities. We had people, different philanthropists, right? The titans of industry, if you will, who set up all of these different sort of safety net systems across the country. But nothing was as coordinated as what FDR and his cabinet wanted to create. Again, following the devastation that was the Great Depression, also going to things like the Dust Bowl and things like that, where we saw there were so many different parts of the country where people were struggling. And so FDR signed into law the Social Security Act, which created the Social Security Administration and what we know now as Social Security, which is this giant program that provides financial protection for millions of Americans in so many different categories. You have, as you guys mentioned earlier, retirees, people with disabilities, people who are survivors of people who have passed on. It's really one of our country's most important social safety nets. It ensures that people who can't work for various reasons still have a basic income to rely on. And so we've seen the foundation of the program remain the same in the past 90 years. And we've seen changes along the way, right? Modernizations, we've seen things be rolled back, things be pushed forward. And now we're in a position where we are, now that we're celebrating 90 years of the program, you have a lot of people who, with the baby boomer generation, who are taking retirement benefits. You have a lot of people who are now qualifying for SSI, the income piece or the disability income piece. And so we're at a point where, we really need to think about the future of the program, how much money is in the program, and how long can it last. So it's currently managed as it's a separate agency within the federal government. And the current commissioner of the Social Security Administration is a man by the name of Frank Bizignani. Yano, who was confirmed on May 6th of this year as a part of the Trump administration. The commissioner served 6-year terms. That's right, Eva, 6 years, right? Yeah,
Correct.
6-year terms. And it's longer than a traditional presidential term of 4 years, because in theory, we want to make sure that this person isn't sort of swayed by the political winds that we see in this country. And so that's how the 6-year term was created. And so now we have a new commissioner who has a new 6-year term, and he's starting to outline some of his priorities. And it's a really interesting time for the administration. It's a really interesting time for, I think, the millions of Americans who depend on the Social Security Administration and Social Security for their livelihood.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, that was thorough.
I love history. And also, I would say I got to celebrate the 90th anniversary of Social Security Administration with FDR's grandson, which was the highlight of my summer.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we're huge FDR fans. I can't, it pains me being a wheelchair user that he had to go through his presidency, hiding the fact that he used a wheelchair all the time. And whenever he's mentioned, I just really wish people like threw it in there, and they never do. But as with many of these programs, as you mentioned, like it's a foundational thing. In the early stages, detractors would say, "Oh, this is socialism in America. This is going to destroy American values." And time again, these things become the bedrock for how we live, and we end up taking it for granted. And it's just a story that seems to repeat itself. But as you mentioned, I think it's in 2034. Am I correct?
They're
When
dropping down to 2033, actually.
2033, when we run, what can you explain briefly what happens in 2033?
Yes.
We're not running out of funds, like it'll still be paying out checks.
Correct. So essentially it's the trust fund. Okay. So this system is set up to where, as a worker, you pay into the trust fund, Social Security Administration trust fund, through your FICA taxes, essentially. And so those funds are set aside and are separate and distinct from, the operating budget of the United States, right? Like it's a different bank account, if you will. And so what the actuaries are projecting is that by a certain future date, I guess 2033 at this point, they're projecting insolvency, which doesn't mean bankruptcy. It just means that the percentage of benefit that each recipient will get will be less than 100% of what they should get.
Yeah,
Right.
I've heard numbers such as they'll be able to pay about 3/4
Right.
of payments, and there would be I think it's like 19% reduction in your actual check, which is concerning, because as you get older, and especially if you are a person with a disability, every dollar counts
Matter.
towards
Yeah.
your care, making sure that you don't suffer from food insecurities, which we covered that earlier this year. And now we're seeing, even with a lot of federal workers being furloughed, they're actually at food pantries now, right? And these people, one thing what we love about the book, it puts an emphasis on prioritizing the way that you save, and not necessarily worrying about Social Security being this overall pension for yourself, but you really have to align the way that your lifestyle you want it to be when you turn 65. And so when you see federal workers being furloughed right now, they're dipping into their savings, young people in their early 30s, et cetera, that's going to ruin how much they can put towards Social Security now, and the nest egg that they're trying to create, which, that's very, very much like a question on our minds, is how can people even be better prepared when they save, as they look forward to going and getting
I think you bring up an excellent point on the piece about prioritizing savings young. But I mean, when I went to business school, I had a professor that said, just don't rely on Social Security. Don't make that your plan, right? And so, but here's the part that nobody tells you. What happens if you become disabled? Because that is not something that anybody plans for. And even if you are saving, chances are excellent at 32, at 34, at 38, you do not have enough life savings at that point to live on potentially into your 90s. And I think that's the big piece that I don't know how much the life expectancy was taken into consideration at the inception of this program.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now we have people that generally live north of 85 in a lot of cases, right? And so when you're looking at a program that was built in 1935, where the life expectancy was not 85 on average, you see how that would create a problem for the solvency of the trust fund, right? Not that we want people dying earlier, but just to say that it was sort of an unexpected outcome that life expectancy would get longer, right? And so now we are in this situation where they are projecting this insolvency piece. And we'll talk a little bit. I want to circle back to this. Don't let me forget. I don't want to jump ahead too far down, but I know we will eventually talk about the Ticket to Work program, and that's something that I think is critical to this too.
Yeah, I would even add to what you said. As you guys probably know, the first recipient, Ida Mae Fuller, to receive Social Security at 70, she wound up living to 100.
Yeah.
Right. And
Right.
benefits doubled. So like you said, you have to put that into place. And that's why they have that age calculator and whatnot to see what you could receive. But just moving on a little bit. So how are different SSA benefits funded? Are
Oh.
there any protections or safeguards that protect beneficiaries from losing their benefits?
Okay.
Well,
Go ahead.
sorry, but before that, Corey, can we do question 2?
Oh, the differences between.
I'm sorry, I thought I jumped my fault. What are the different parts of Social Security? SSDI, SSI, and just retirement benefits. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think you have to start there before we answer your next question, Corey. But essentially, there are 3 main types of benefits. Obviously, retirement benefits are accessible once you either reach full retirement age, which in the United States now I believe is 66 and change, depending on when you're born, or if you opt to take early retirement at age 62, you're essentially opting into a lower lifetime benefit amount if you take it early. And so those 2 buckets don't have anything to do with being disabled. Those are like you are reaching a milestone at or close to full retirement age, and you're choosing to pull benefits out at that point. And some American workers they don't take their benefits at 62 or 66. They continue working a little while and then pull. And then Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, or Title II is another reference to that program. That is for workers who have paid into the system through their FICA taxes and have met Social Security's definition of disability, which, by the way, is not your definition or your doctor's definition. It's pretty specific. We can talk more about the actual definition when we talk about qualifying, but that is, basically tied to your earnings record, how long you've worked and your quarters of coverage, and whether or not you meet their definition of disability. And then there is SSI, or Supplemental Security Income, also known as Title 16. And that is sort of more of that safety net benefit for the aged, blind, or disabled who have limited income and resources. All 3 are administered through the Social Security Administration. And then to Ryan's earlier point, there are some other types of benefits associated with being a widow or having a disabled adult child, those sorts of things.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, SSDI also gives you access to Medicare, and SSI then also gives you access to Medicaid. So there's tie-in to.
You do have a
to other
24-month
programs.
waiting period, though, for Medicare, which is a huge problem
course.
for a lot of people I serve.
Yes.
And I'm so glad to meet Eva and Ryan today as a benefits counselor who's working directly with beneficiaries who are trying to navigate this system. My dream is to be in front of a group of congressional representatives and senators and let them know how real life application of Social Security works for real life beneficiaries. But there is that 24-month waiting period unless you have ALS or ESRD.
And also, one other thing to note, it is 24 months from the first month of cash benefits.
Right,
With Social Security Disability,
not onset.
you're waiting a full 5 months before your first month of cash benefit. So it's really 29 months in the grand scheme of things before Medicare kicks in.
Is that done to make sure that you are completely disabled in case like you recover? Like, why the 2-year waiting period?
Great question.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could answer that question honestly, Corey. I don't know, other than I suspect it's a way to save money. But I don't know for a fact that that's why.
No, yeah.
Probably built-in lag to let the people who are temporarily disabled not have to rely on the system, I'm guessing.
I mean, I will say this, the Social Security Administration's definition of disability is one that we often have to explain in layman's terms to claimants, because if you are a roofer and you fall from a 30-foot roof and you break both of your legs, that is an unfortunate situation, but you are not going to meet the definition of disability according to Social Security, right? And so it's hard for people to understand, especially those workers that don't have some sort of short-term disability policy, that you are going to be waiting possibly 3 years to get approved for benefits. And that is with the strongest of cases sometimes. And unfortunately for you, or fortunately for you, both of your legs are going to heal, in probably 16, 20 weeks, 24 weeks, in a much shorter period of time, right? And so it's a constant discussion that we have to have with people about, well, ma'am, I can't wait 3 years. Well, sir, then maybe you're not disabled according to Social Security's definition of disability.
I thought it was expected to be unable to work substantially for 12 months.
Well, it is. The definition is that you would, that you have a severe medically determinable impairment or combination of impairments that's expected to last 12 months or is expected to result in your death. So anything that could heal within 12 months, your time to get to even a hearing is going to be longer than that, right?
Right.
It's kind of one of those things where you're like, as much as we would love to forward a case for you, if you have a case that's winnable, you might not in certain situations, right? Because the healing time is not going to take that long, Yeah.
So going to the next question then, because I'm sure we'll get more into the weeds as we go. We mentioned this 2033 kind of looming deadline to get these things funded. Given the different mechanisms, SSI is general taxes, SSDI and RBI, those are payroll taxes, FICA taxes. Are there any protections or safeguards that protect beneficiaries from losing their benefits in those cases?
Are you talking about when they go back to work or just in general?
I guess asking the question, how secure is Social Security as how dependable is it? For people who are looking to the future, like, oh, I'm going to retire at some point, is the money going to be there? Or what happens if I get a disability? How dependable is that disability check?
Yeah. I think that the truth of it is a dependable program. Like, the government is shut down now. Disability recipients are still receiving their checks, right? Retirement recipients are still receiving their checks. Okay. So in terms of, does the Social Security Administration administer the benefits to the best of their ability? The answer is yes. But I think to your question about will the money be there, if you're 22 years old, I would caution you strongly against betting on that. If you're 61, different story, right? Like, yeah, probably you're going to get a retirement check. Now, I think that, and I could go down a very deep, dark rabbit hole, so I won't. But just to say, I think that there are things that can be done. And this is what, what really our organization, and with the help of Ryan, is thinking about.
And I'd also like to add to that. I think, from a political perspective, Social Security is often seen as what we call the third rail, right? It's something that, from a bipartisan perspective, Republicans and Democrats want to protect and strengthen Social Security to make sure that they can extend the life of the program and push that solvency out. Now, their definition of protect and strengthen will differ based upon sort of where they sit in their political leanings, where they are on the political spectrum. But we can guarantee, right, that this is a program that people want to make sure can stay around. I think the question, to Eva's point of if you're 22 versus you're 61, I think if you're 22, if you're on that younger end, the program will likely still be around, but how much you get once it's retirement age will be dependent upon so many different factors. I can tell you there are, constantly nonpartisan studies and reports, think tank reports. There is an Office of the Actuary at SSA that studies solvency and does the projections. But there's also a lot of members of Congress and congressional committees that are thinking about different policies and pathways to extend the solvency of the program. They haven't been as successful as you guys mentioned. It's been shortened a little bit, but the momentum to try to figure something out is always like an undercurrent. And I do believe that we can get there one day to try to figure out, how do we extend the life of the program. I think the details will depend on, what members of Congress can come to an agreement on.
I think one of the concerns that the book notes is the fact that and I know we'll probably maybe get to more like myths relating to it, but you have like a portion of the population who may be retiring early, living longer, but then there's lower birth rates since the 1960s. So even when you're talking about like trying to square it away, like there's going to be an issue when it comes down to the funding. There's going to be some type of higher taxes that have to occur. So I don't know how they'll get there when, one group wants to lower taxes, one group, understands that it's necessary to raise taxes. But I had a question concerning the protections before we kind of move on. Is there any way a person can lose their Social Security benefits, i.e., person commits a crime and they're older, they're 68 or what have you, and they're put in prison or anything like that? Would they then relinquish their right to receive Social Security, or would they still be able to receive it even if they're imprisoned?
They would definitely lose SSI while incarcerated.
Okay.
I believe they keep their benefit. I mean, Ryan or Eva, correct me if I'm wrong. I know they lose SSI.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not a retirement expert, but I think that once you've met the requirement to receive retirement benefits,
You keep them.
Social Security disability insurance, I don't believe, unless you're a dual recipient of both SSDI and SSI, is affected. But I'm going to double check my work while we're
Yeah, the SSI is definitely stopped because that is for room and board,
Yeah.
food and housing. And you've got that when you're incarcerated. So that would stop.
And then depending on the state, you would also lose your Medicaid.
Medicaid.
benefits.
Yep. Most likely the SSI would go into suspense, which would put your Medicaid in suspense as well.
So the SSDI payments are generally stopped if you're incarcerated for more than 30 consecutive days after being convicted.
Okay.
I knew there was some ticky-tacky rule there, but I couldn't remember it.
Oh, that is good to note and a good reminder not to commit crimes after.
Yes, sir.
Anytime.
General rule of thumb.
So these are good thoughts. So for those younger people in their early 20s, keep your thumb on the pulse of what's happening in the politics and make your voices heard, because this is going to impact, the benefits that you may receive. So moving on, Heather, maybe you want to tackle this first. How, when you're talking to people, how do you help them enroll or know if they qualify for SSDI or SSI?
The first thing I have them do is open a My SSA online account, which will tell them if they are eligible for any SSDI based off their record. And then there's lots of different questions I ask. Have you worked? When did your disability occur? Do you have a parent that's deceased or retired? All those kind of questions go through my mind when I'm working with someone not on disability benefits. Now, my main job is to get people off of disability benefits and help them understand how to navigate these systems. But those are certain questions that I ask. A younger person might be a concurrent beneficiary, get some kind of Title II benefit like SSDI along with SSI, kind of get the best of both worlds in terms of work incentives and such. And then we have our dual eligible who might have a parent who's deceased and retired to draw on their record as well as their own record of Social Security disability insurance. So it's really just understanding each individual's situation and scenario and how that will work.
And it's also
Oh,
really
sorry.
important to note that a younger individual, I think under 30, has different rules for eligibility in terms of work
credits. Yeah.
credits that they look at. And so it would be important for a younger individual to look at that a little more closely than somebody older than 30, because the older than 30 is a little easier to remember. 20 out of 40 of the last quarters have to be met in order to be considered eligible.
So I had a question for Heather and Ryan. Eva. So when it comes down to, because I've heard people ask this question before, and it's a constant concern in the disability community. I would love to get off of SSDI, but I'm too afraid that if I find work and I'm earning above that threshold, that what if I get laid off and now I don't have anything to fall back on? How do you quell those fears? That's one. And then how many credits do you need in order to receive Social Security income?
I could take the first part of that question. I'm going to defer to the other ladies here for the second part of that question. But the fear of getting off SSDI, all my training, I'm trained through the national, through Virginia Commonwealth University, a National Training and Data Center, which is a federal contractor for Social Security Administration. And in our training, it is always clearly said, if you have to stop working for any reason, you can easily get back on benefits. It's the furthest thing from the truth. Furthest thing from the truth. So Corey, in your situation, if you were getting a Title II benefit like SSDI, you've got your 9 trial work months, a 9-month period that doesn't have to run consecutive, where you can have unlimited earnings that will not affect your cash benefit. Now, if you're in Medicaid or something like that, any income affects that. Okay. So when you call the Social Security office and they say it doesn't affect anything, it doesn't affect anything for a federal benefit, but it is most likely and most surely going to affect a Medicaid benefit. After that 9th month, you enter a 36-month rolling window called your extended period of eligibility. If you're above that year's SGA, no check. If you're below it, check. And the important thing to remember with substantial gainful activity or SGA is there are different rules for blind individuals versus non-blind. There's a much higher threshold for blind. After that, and your benefits terminate, you have a 5-year window called expedited reinstatement of benefits. When you do an abbreviated application, you will get up to 6 months of provisional benefits. In my time, I think one time in my 12 years, I've seen that EXR application get approved within 6 months. Typically in situations where you're in your extended period of eligibility, you're financially strapped, you can request a critical payment, which means I am broke, I'm going to get evicted, my lights are going to get shut off, please give me my benefit back. But that doesn't work with expedited reinstatement. So you're at the realm of waiting for that to be reinstated. That being said, the rules as they're lined out should work. The actual thing I am seeing on a day-to-day basis is it's not easy to do that.
Right. And this is one of the things that the National Association of Disability Representatives has really tried to focus on with SSA executives is not just the backlog, right, of applications pending, or hearing wait time or workflows in other arenas, but also to your point, Heather, the only thing that's consistent is the inconsistency, right?
Correct.
And so that's hard, Corey, for somebody like you who is dependent on that income to take the leap of faith that you're going to go down a program that seems like, oh, this could be my way out of getting, being on benefits. And yet at the same time, you feel as though you're risking it all by taking that leap of faith, right? I would encourage anybody that's listening to the podcast today to make sure that if you want to try to go back to work, if you're currently a recipient of disability benefits and you want to attempt to return to work, that you work with somebody to do that. You work with an employment network who can help you through that program, and make sure that you're documenting everything and that that you're staying the course the way that you need to stay the course and can prove it. Should you get looked at by SSA for any reason. And it is possible. I mean, we have talked to people who have been determined disabled according to Social Security disability rules, have been a recipient of disability benefits for periods of time, and then have managed to get themselves off the rolls and back to work. And I submit to everybody, no matter your demographic, isn't that the win-win? Like, don't we want that?
We absolutely do. And I've worked with hundreds of thousands. I have an employment network in the Ticket to Work program, was also on the board of directors for the National Employment Network Association for a number of years.
Yes.
And yes, I work with thousands of people who don't want to be on these benefits. What happens is a relapse with their condition, the inability to continue working. I work with 95% individuals with spinal cord injuries and illnesses. Pressure wounds are a big thing. So I have a pressure wound now. I can't work for a year, and it's getting back on them so that they have some type of financial means to live.
Right.
And I've talked with I talk with Social Security claims reps all the time on behalf, with clients, on behalf of clients. And they're, from an advocacy standpoint, I'm usually told, well, they'll get back pay, and that's great. But when rent's due today, getting back pay 8 months from now is not helpful.
Well, and it is true that when you work for the federal government, your paycheck hits every 2 weeks, does it not?
It comes like clockwork,
It
right?
comes like clockwork, right? And so sometimes
I actually said that once to a Social Security claims rep, and she hung up on me.
I believe, and the thing is, you get passionate when
Not the first time.
when you're working with people and you get invested in their story and what's happening to them, and you want what's best for them, and you're trying your best to advocate. It's hard sometimes to check yourself on these phone calls with people who say things like, well, they're going to get back pay. Yeah, ma'am. And before then, he's going to be living under the bridge.
And they're currently living in their car as a paraplegic. Mhm.
I mean, and yeah, I mean, the system being such, it's a great support when it works, but it is very
Correct.
scary getting back to work. And so anyone listening, please reach out to More Than Walking or spinalpedia.com, sign up for peer mentoring, and you will get connected to Heather and other employment networks that can help support you in the Ticket to Work program, and getting that one-on-one support you absolutely need to navigate the system, because it is complex. And one of those aspects of complexity is going over the income or the asset limit, even by $1. It is an unforgiving system.
Yep.
And maybe we could talk about that as you enroll and qualify for SSDI, SSI. What are the income and asset limits associated with receiving those benefits? If we could tackle that as we encourage people who need it. Sounds like a scary program with a bunch of limits, but it's really helpful, and these are the limits you need to know about in order to qualify. So let's tackle that next.
I can tell you SSDI or Title II benefits really don't care about assets for the most part. They just don't. That is money you have paid in, or your parents have paid in to FICA taxes. That is your insurance money, period. So no limits there. Now, if you're dependent on Medicaid, I always come back to this. If you're dependent on Medicaid, most states have a limit. There are some states that have Medicaid buy-ins with no resource limit, but most have them. SSI is $2,000 for an individual. What is it? 3 for a couple, Ryan?
Yes.
3 for a couple. Outside of things like special needs trust, able accounts, that might be about it for
Car and a house.
SSI.
Yeah. And then the resource part of that is home and one vehicle is excluded and wouldn't count against you as a resource. But let's say you had inherited your dad's, vintage Mustang, they would count that potentially as a resource.
And I help a lot of people that are in that situation, and they're planning. We always advise to go to an elder attorney, but setting those things up so that they're not left to you, but left to a trust for you, so that it doesn't make you ineligible for your skilled nursing benefits. It doesn't make you ineligible for your personal care assistance that you need to live and work. And so lots of elder planning is important when you're looking at family members that have significant resources to leave behind.
Yeah. And I know that I think it's since 1975, those asset limits for SSI haven't been updated. And there were two bills that were trying to push those limits up to, I think, what, 10 and 20,000
Yeah.
respectively for single and couples.
Yeah.
Am I right on that, Ryan?
Yeah, that's correct. And I will also add that there are bills, I would say, every congressional session to tweak those asset limits. You have a lot of folks who are accurately pointing out, that if you were, for example, to go to someone's home for Thanksgiving, right? Like in some states, some jurisdictions will try to require you to get like a receipt in order to
Oh, for the
prove.
love.
Yeah, and so there's been all of these sort of reports and congressional hearings about this exact issue, that like we need to raise that limit. And I think the question is exactly what that number should be in a way that reflects where we are present day with the cost of everything, and really, considering just how interconnected some of these systems are. So when we talk about SSI and Medicaid, oftentimes you also have to consider what your state does in terms of housing benefits and food stamps, right? Everything is coordinated, and it's really important for people to understand, how those limits interact with each other and what counts from SSA perspective and what doesn't count from an SSA perspective. But you're totally correct. There's always pieces of legislation being introduced to try to fix the issue that they haven't been modernized since the 70s. Unfortunately, there just is not a lot of, I think, political will right now to pass that piece of legislation. And it's not because, of SSI or people want to keep the limits low. It's really because there isn't a lot of air in the room to pass any bills now. And so it has to rise to that level. Like, we can't fund the government, for example, right? And so it's hard to see a bill like this passing right now when Congress is shut down.
But believe you me, it is definitely something that our organization talks about, thinks about, Ryan click-clacks on the Hill about, it is true that it's on our radar, most definitely.
And we're trying to make sure that the issue is on the policymakers and their staff's radar as well. And so that's part of what we do at NADR, is making sure that, we can be a voice for not only our members, but the beneficiaries that they serve out here in DC, be it at SSA's headquarters or on Capitol Hill.
Has it ever been discussed? Now, I recognize that with ABLE accounts, we did move the age before you're disabled up to 46 starting January 2026. Where did that number come from?
I'm not sure.
I'm just curious if you guys know, because to me, it's a completely arbitrary number. I have a lot of folks who were disabled after the age of 46, and I just say, sorry, I don't. Write your congressperson.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any, you guys worked so closely with this stuff. Is there any explanation where they came up with that age limit?
I wish I could answer your question. I don't know.
Okay, you did answer my question by saying no.
Heather, it was some consultant's formula calculation, and they had to round it to the nearest year. It wasn't who knows.
Yeah, no.
So darn you if you have a car accident when you're 46 in one day, you cannot have an ABLE account if you're permanently disabled after that.
Which is crazy to think of. But,
Yeah.
just, thinking about politics, we do know that there was a gentleman in the House of Representatives who had introduced these bills, but unfortunately he passed away. But his daughter won a special election for his seat in Arizona. But currently, because the government is shut down, they're not trying to get her in there, which, you can safely assume that she would continue her father's work in that effort to reform those bills. But that's a conversation for another day. But moving on to question 6, is one's income calculated at face value when considering the different limits as pertaining to income and asset limits?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
Well, and especially for SSI, because, you look on the websites and it says the income is this. And then, Heather, I've had conversations with you and you're like, oh, no, you actually you double that because they cut it in half. And I'm like, why don't they say it's so.
I will tell you, in terms of, I'm not speaking about retirement. I'm talking about disability under the age of 65, SSI and or SSDI or another Title II. Social Security deals with countable wages. That means gross wages minus any applicable work incentives, okay? Countable wages. So someone who's on SSDI or SSI can use things like impairment related work expenses to reduce their countable wages pretty much dollar for dollar. Now your Title II benefits like SSDI, they are subject to substantial gainful activity, which is if you are $1 over this, no check. If you're $1 below it, you get a check. And that's when those work incentives like subsidy, impairment related work expense, come into play to help reduce the countable income. Because if you're earning $1,700 a month and your check is $2,500, does it make sense to earn $1,700 a month and lose your $2,500 SSDI check? That is a no. The answer is no. It makes no sense. So on the Title II side, it's different. Now the SSI side, there's no trial work period, nothing like that. Your check is reduced by about $1 for every $2 in earned income. Unearned income, unemployment, I suppose like a gift or something, financial gift is reduces your SSI dollar for dollar. And you can also apply impairment related work expenses that help. If you're blind, there's blind work expenses, which are even more inclusive and have more options than someone who's not blind. That's purely an SSI work incentive though. So I don't know if I kind of talked around that. I don't know if I really answered the question, but it depends is my answer.
Yeah, and I would just say that this is exactly the reason why anybody that's pursuing Social Security disability benefits really needs to look for a qualified representative to help them with this process. Obviously somebody like Heather, who's an expert on the back end, helping people return to work is also super important. But if you find yourself in a position to need to apply for Social Security disability, I would highly suggest you reach out. We can actually give you guys our telephone referral service number, which we're happy for you to publish. But basically, the statistics are pretty amazing when you talk about hearing level adjudication. So if you go to your hearing, which is the third step of the adjudication process for Social Security disability, and you're unrepresented, the chances of approval are basically a crapshoot. I mean, it's going to depend on the judge. It's going to depend on your region. Best is 50-50, right? That's the best guess that anyone would have. But if you go represented, that number goes up into the 70s of getting approved, right? So it's really important that you consider that. And I will also say that representatives, both attorney and non-attorney disability representatives, they get paid on a contingency fee, which means they don't win any money unless they win your case. Right. And it's generally paid out of back pay that Social Security would pay you. So you're not going to have to come up with a $30,000 retainer out the gate. It is accessible. All this to say, having representation is accessible.
Yeah. And I would love to have I just started receiving disability benefits. What now? Publication or something. And we also, Eva, we have a SSI, SSDI attorney that my boss has a relationship, and we recommend everyone work with them because of what you just said. I didn't know the stats were that different, but that's very eye-opening. And we always encourage people to work with an attorney to get it done right the first time around. And same as you said, there's no upfront payments. It's controlled what they can charge. You don't have to come up with a big retainer, because if you're needing these benefits, you probably don't have a lot of money sitting around. But yeah, that's really eye-opening for me, that difference in adjudication.
And if you're denied, if I remember reading correctly, the appeal process can take years. So it's best to get it right the first time.
Yeah, and I think that's another important thing. If you're incapacitated in any way for any reason, be it physical or mental, one of the things that holds people up in this process is missing appeal deadlines, right? And so if you miss an appeal deadline, that's a problem for your case. But if you have somebody appointed to represent you, then it is their job to make sure that the paperwork that comes through and the deadlines that they issue are being completed timely. And so they really help stay on track for you, right? They make sure, hey, did you get the letter? They're sending you for a consultative examination. You need to make sure you have transportation on this day at this time, or they send a packet of forms. This is an activity of daily living. We're going to schedule a phone call so we can go through those together, whatever it may be. I think a representative's professional duty is to keep your claim on track.
Yep. And Eva, correct me if I'm wrong. The individual we refer folks to, if she gets them and they're in the middle of an appeal, she cannot help them. Is that, do you know, is that standard
I mean,
practice?
that is, that might be her firm's practice.
Okay,
We don't jump
so it's
in.
not necessarily the rule.
So, I mean, you could have had a representative and fired them and you
Okay,
find a new representative, right? So it really is sort of personal preference of the rep, whether or not
Okay.
they hop in and out. But many will still take your case.
okay,
That is good to know. So even if you're in the middle of the process, you can
Yeah.
get additional support.
Yeah, when I was taking
Um,
cases, I used to tell people, hey, listen, your case is borderline at best. I want to help you, but let me send you to vocational rehab, it's through the state agency.
Ah.
Go to Voc Rehab. If Voc Rehab comes back and says, we can't place you because of your disabilities, then that's excellent evidence because they're a division of the Department of Labor and so is DDS, right? They're sister agencies. So we would do that all the time. And then we would hop in after they get denied.
okay.
Yep. So just before, does anyone have a hard 1 o'clock out?
I do not.
Okay. So we can go a little longer, but I just want to jump in and, focus a little bit on some subpopulations of the communities that we're talking about. So, how does immigration or citizenship status affect your eligibility for these programs? Or if you're a veteran, or if you're a man versus a woman, how do these programs treat you differently? Go.
I can only speak on the veterans stuff, and there's supposed to be a more seamless transition into SSDI if you're already receiving like veterans compensation or something like that.
Yeah.
I've always found it to be true with the veterans I work with that get both VA comp and SSDI.
I think that actually tracks closely with the veteran service.
Okay,
So
good.
if you only ever worked as in the Army, let's say, and they paid in through the VA, then of course their benefits track differently, right? But if they also had civilian work or were a veteran and then worked in the civilian world, they could be a dual recipient. And SSA's definition of disability is not the same as the VA's definition of disability. So the VA usually gives you a rating, like we consider you 60% disabled, right? It is helpful in a disability claim if another agency is saying you were even partially disabled, right?
Right.
So it's good additional evidence for a Social Security disability claim. It doesn't mean necessarily that you'll be approved, but you could be, and it could be helpful. Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Heather.
I would definitely agree with that. Just because I'm a Naval veteran, got hurt while I was in the service and what have you. And to be honest with you, I had everything at my disposal. I had benefits advocates for getting my veterans benefits. I had Social Security advocates.
Mhm.
And literally, I can remember my benefits advocate saying to me, Joe Basmarowski, he said, I've never seen anyone benefits come through as quickly as yours.
Wow.
Wow.
And I literally started getting stuff like probably December. I got hurt in June of 05 and everything started rolling in December.
Now, this is on the Social Security side or VA side?
I want to say almost both.
Okay,
Wow.
wow, that is fast.
Both.
That's fast.
Oh.
But yeah, no, that is absolutely true. And I didn't mean to cut in on that, just thinking about what you guys are saying, but like what about those who are maybe undocumented
Yeah,
or do have work visas and
part
stuff?
of this one. So generally, the SSA rules are that you have to be a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident with both a work authorization and a valid Social Security number. There are instances where some refugees or some people who've been granted asylum can qualify, but under very, very special provisions. And that's something to be mindful of as well.
Does that mean if you have that work visa, you have to apply for a Social Security card in order to then be a recipient of getting Social Security benefits if you've been here?
I cannot speak to that process for the
Hey, me neither.
I do know that you have to have the work authorization and a valid Social Security number. So I don't know if you get the work authorization, do you automatically start that process? I'm fuzzy on that piece, but I do know that you have to be a U.S. citizen or a lawfully permanent resident with those two pieces.
Now, I just met with a gentleman about 2 weeks ago who was an asylum seeker. He got up to 7 years of SSI. Should that have happened? Is that correct?
Well, there are
Everything I've read said yes, but
yeah. So some refugees and some asylum seekers may
Okay.
qualify, but they're under certain special provisions that SSA has outlined on their
and he was a Cuban refugee, so I think it was in the Cuban Haiti refugee reset or whatever. So
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a more limited scope. It's not impossible, but it's a more limited scope.
Okay.
So, okay, thank you for that. So I want to address this because it was like a bit frustrating reading it in the book, and it pertains to being that we have women on this call, that you guys live longer, but you receive Social Security less. Like, why? Like, I mean, like, what is going on with that? I thought we would be kind of past, the gender gaps with pay scales and stuff like that. But like,
Really?
I would hope. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's just,
I mean,
maybe that's just the optimist in me.
I think, Corey, I think you're right, but it's important to remember that, because of the demographics of folks who are taking Social Security, right, they're going to skew older, especially on the retirement side, right? And we know that according to the data, women often have lower lifetime earnings or take time out of the workforce for caregiving, for for their families, for their parents, right? And we see that the women are more likely to be caregivers for their family and their communities than men. We just see that bear out in the data. So then their monthly benefits tend to be different and smaller. I think that's one reason why we see that the survivor benefits are incredibly important for women, because they help sort of close that income gap later in life. But that's sort of the bare bones data of it, is that women often take more time out of the workforce, and I think we see that trend now with the older generations, and I think we're going to see it with younger generations as time comes to pass because of things like COVID, right? We know that COVID, the data showed that large amounts of working women took step away from their jobs during the pandemic to care for their families or young children, and help them sort of navigate that pandemic. And so I think we're going to see it ebb and flow, right, of what women's benefits look like because of the life circumstances that we see in the data.
But to your point, Corey, that's aside from the fact that there's probably still a pay gap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I Jonathan and Corey, you know someone who is in a really horrible situation. She chose to be mom for the most part, but then her and her husband opened a very profitable brewery and music venue. They filed married jointly. She was just as responsible for taxes on that business as he was. And she had a spinal stroke and is not eligible for any Social Security disability. And when her ex-husband, now ex, retires, I believe she will only get 50% of that benefit. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
It's just an example of a terrible situation.
Yeah.
When you have mom, or it could be flipped, but like you said, we see it more with women, and she ran the business, also was the primary caregiver for the children. And now, after suffering a freak incident, has no entitlement to anything.
It's important if you're in a self-employment or married employment situation where you co-own a business that you, I would say, absolutely seek tax advice.
Yes.
Make sure that you are.
My friend would say the same.
Yeah. Set yourself up for success in that way, by just getting, having a consultation on the front end. How do we need to set this up? How do we need to report? How do we need to file? How do we need to pay for, such a tragic situation like that as an example?
Right.
And I'll also add there, from a legislative regulatory perspective, there are also a lot of advocates right now who are pushing for various fixes to exactly this disparity that we're talking about. And know that there are some states that will allow for family caregivers to register with the state as family caregiving, even unpaid, formal informal caregiving as a form of employment, in order to rectify this issue. But it's something that people are taking note of, and I'm really happy that you guys included this on the list of questions, because I think it's something that more people need to be aware of, and the more people that are aware of the disparity, the more we can think about what state or federal solutions we need to talk about putting forward.
Right.
I love to hear that. I'd love music to my ears.
Because I think we skipped Corey's Corey's question on this, which is, the amount of work credits that you normally need is what? It's 40?
It's 20 out of 40 in the last
20
10
out of 40. Right. And then your benefit, the amount of your benefit depends on a certain number of years of the highest earnings. So it depends on how much you're getting paid per year as well, which just kind of compounds the situation if you have a gender pay gap, or a disability pay gap or whatever have you. That just compounds the situation if then, those years don't count if you're at home caregiving or out of
Right.
work because of disability recurrence or something along those lines.
Yeah, because they do a look back to see how recently you've worked and how much you've worked. And if you meet that 2040 rule for the Social Security disability insurance side. And they do count those quarters of coverage, and that does impact your primary insurance amount, is what they call your benefit rate. But it's a calculation. Don't ask me how to calculate that. Way beyond my pay grade, but it is a calculation that they do, and that helps determine your monthly rate.
And a situation that just came up for me a couple weeks ago, and something that I personally experienced, was working for a municipality that did not pay into Social Security. So I had 13 years of very substantial earnings, and had I become disabled, would only be eligible maybe for SSI. Now my municipality had a retirement security plan in place, but so we, I understood that and prepared, but I'm working with a client now who had the same thing happen, only she was 19 years old, 20 years old working and had no clue what any of this meant. So there is that piece of that as well.
Yeah, and I will say the same thing is true for teachers in some states.
Oh, really?
Teach,
Wow.
yeah, in a situation where you pay into a teacher's retirement and it is not associated with Social Security disability. So
That for police officers too?
possibly police officers too in some areas, yeah.
Yeah, I know in the municipality I worked for down in North Texas, all the none of us paid into Social Security. Wow.
So this question right here, I think, is important. So how long does it take to be approved for SSDI or SSI? And what role do you see AI playing concerning processing applications more quickly?
I'll take the first part. This is a loaded question, and it's dependent on what region you live in, and the current backlog of cases in that particular region. But it's also important for listeners to understand the actual adjudication process. So there's the initial application. You file that through your local field office, or online. And that application goes to DDS, Disability Determination Services is what it's called here in Texas, but could go by a different name in other states. But that is a division of the Department of Labor. It goes there, and it can take, I think, current initial application, probably good average is 6 months maybe right now to get give or take, to get a response back. Many applications at the initial level, especially if you're not a designated Terry case, which is like a terminal case, get denied. And so then you're in a process of appeal. You appeal and you go to what's called reconsideration. Your case goes back to the state agency for review. And that, again, is highly dependent on what the current caseload is in that area. But let's call it another 6 months. And then if you get denied there, you file a request for hearing with an administrative law judge. The wait time on that can be significantly longer, depending on where you are. So you could be looking at 2 to 3 years before you go to a hearing, depending on what part of the country you live in. And then once you get to the hearing level, you go hopefully with your representative to your hearing. If you get denied there, you file an appeal with the Appeals Council, and that's in Falls Church, Virginia. All claims nationally go to Falls Church. And then I actually don't have a current wait time at the Appeals Council, but I don't think it's short. So those are the 4 lower levels of adjudication that, let's say, a non-attorney disability advocate or ADPNA could help you with. If you get denied at the Appeals Council, then you do have to file a motion in federal district court, and you would be required to have an attorney do that for you. Probably upwards of 4 years to get to that point. In some cases, it's faster. I would submit to you that with a representative that knows what they're doing, who can say, hey, this is a great case that we could maybe submit an on the record request for, which is where they lay the facts out for the adjudicator in advance of a decision and say, hey, they meet listing blah, blah, blah because of exhibits XYZ in their medical file. And we think that this needs to be approved now. So there are ways to win earlier, but generally speaking, this is a long road solution.
And I can attest to that because I have an example for everything, Eva.
I love it.
I had a young woman who was blind living in the Los Angeles area, and that was deemed a presumptive disability, and she got her award letter within 2 weeks.
Mm.
Yeah.
I was very impressed.
Yeah.
Only took 2 weeks.
Under presumptive disability, which, a sliver of people kind of fall into that category.
Right.
You're an anomaly and you're like her, get paid quickly. But just for the general, back cases, where they have, slip discs and nerve impingement, and then maybe it's comorbidity with mental health issues, all of the, it just, you're going to take a little bit, especially if you're under 55,
Yeah.
Is spinal cord injury presumptive
Should be, but it's not, in my opinion.
disability?
No, it's not.
Nope. That's right. It's those walking quads that ruin it for us.
They do.
And I can take the AI piece of that question.
Shoot.
So, SSA, like every other agency in the federal government, and I'd even offer most companies are exploring how artificial intelligence can be used to benefit the process that they already have. We've seen, across the administration, for example, Health and Human Services, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which regulates Medicare and Medicaid in the country, led by Dr. Oz. They're, talking about how they have all these really cool new AI features that they're testing out right now to roll out when it comes to fraud, waste, and abuse. And SSA is really no different in how they're thinking about, using new and emerging technologies to address some maybe issues in the process that Eva laid out. We are expecting some regulations coming from the Social Security Administration as early as December, but going into next year, that could give us some more insight into what SSA wants to use AI for. Regulations are going to be proffered as proposed rules. As you guys may know, for every proposed rule, there is a comment opportunity where the public, be it individuals or organizations, can submit comments to help SSA and really any agency within the federal government shape the final rules that go into effect. And so I would recommend, you guys, all the listeners and different organizations to take a look at some of these proposed rules that we're expecting, again, starting in December and going all the way until, the next summer, that could have some glimpses into what SSA wants to do with AI in the disability adjudication process, in their data collection process, because then we can have a better sense of what's to come. There's a lot of congressional interest in artificial intelligence, but there's also a lot of wariness when it comes to artificial intelligence, especially used by SSA. Generally, these fall along party lines, right, where Democrats are really nervous about bias in AI and what that could mean for people who are disabled, people who are a part of marginalized groups, people who, may be more susceptible to sort of technological advances for scams and things like that. Yeah. Republicans are much more likely to be more experimental when it comes to AI, just historically. There is a really interesting congressional caucus that's bipartisan. It's the Congressional Caucus on Artificial Intelligence. And I would expect, once the government comes back open and they start to have more hearings and things start to go back to normal when it comes to government functions, they will likely start to have some congressional hearings on the use of AI across the government and including SSA. But again, there's still a lot that we don't know. We're still at the very early stages. So I would really recommend that folks just keep your finger on the pulse of proposed rules coming out of SSA. You can find those on regulations.gov or the Federal Register, and navigate to the SSA landing page on those two websites and comb through some of these rules and see what they're talking about in relation to AI, how they plan to use AI. And sometimes it may be a situation where the agency is asking the general public, where the public thinks AI can be best suited for. So it may be a set of questions that they pose versus giving, we want to use AI for X, Y, and Z. But it's really interesting time for artificial intelligence right now. And I think that, if shaped correctly, it could be a tool that could help with some of the sort of backlog issues that we're talking about, with the timeliness of this process as well. But again, the caveat is if used correctly.
I wholeheartedly agree with you on that, Ryan. I think that's NADR's stance as well, that we would like to see some IT modernization across the board within the agency. And if that incorporates some artificial intelligence in some way that doesn't rely on a computer making a disability determination, right? That we could see how that could potentially be helpful, especially to an agency that, is underfunded, and there are lots of people questioning whether they're understaffed at the current present time, considering the wait times on hold and things like that.
Yeah. Corey and I, in preparation for this discussion, reviewed a segment by John Oliver on Last Week Tonight from a year ago, which was hilarious. But one of the things he highlighted was that in that review of application process, oftentimes there's other doctors, not your primary care doctor. It's not up to your primary care doctor to determine if you're disabled, but it's another medical reviewer. And the number of files that they get paid to review are so many within the course of a year. Sometimes he cited one example where, in order for this doctor to cover all the cases they were looking at, they would only have 12 minutes to review each case. And that is ripe for mistakes, for people who deserve benefits and who then get denied and have to go through this years-long appeal process to get what they paid for, what they paid into the system for. So interesting to hear that, hopefully technology, as you mentioned, will use to make things faster, more efficient, but not a computer reading not a computer making our decisions.
I would love to see AI used for things like reporting wages, updating Social Security, records, putting the EIN number on someone's account so they can report through an app or online, things like that. I would love to see it being used for, or for question and answer sessions kind of thing, with someone who's monitoring that. You've got to be, I put a lot of stuff into ChatGPT, and I every now and again get mistakes with, SGA limits, trial work period limits, stuff like that. So
again, if employed correctly, I think it could be useful. And I think for sure anybody that's experimented with AI can attest to efficiencies gained, right? But not to the detriment of the outcome.
Absolutely.
John,
I agree with
before
that.
you move on to question 11, if somebody could answer this alongside of answering question 11. You talked about like 6 months, another 6 months, and then by the time you get to the appellate process, you're 4 years into it. I wanted to know, and maybe I misunderstood it in reading the book, but with that appellate process, is there a cap for how much money can be spent on a lawyer looking into it, like to determine, excuse me, whether or not you are eligible for Social Security? So yeah, I wanted to know about that.
Yeah, so SSA sets the maximum fee allowable. And I'll say this with a grain of salt, like for most cases, it's a max fee of 25% of your back pay benefits, not to exceed $9,200 currently. Now that said, there are ways in which representatives, if they feel that they have worked on a case for a really long time, can submit, instead of a fee agreement, a fee petition, or they petition for a higher fee based on the work that they did. But on the norm, most representatives are using a fee agreement and agreeing to that cap. Now, I am not an attorney, so I cannot speak to what happens when you get to federal district court after those 4 years of the lower levels of adjudication have come and gone. And now you do need an attorney. I know that there's an EJA fee process there, and I don't know all of the nuts and bolts of what they get paid and that sort of thing. But I do know that, you know, for the vast majority of cases that are won at the lower levels, you're looking at a max fee of $9,200 in most cases.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then, I think we're gonna have to wrap up, but should have asked this, should have been my first question as like the hook for why people should pursue SSI or SSDI in the first place. What is the min or max amounts that we're talking about when we're talking about these disability benefits through SSI or SSDI? I know a lot of people that I've spoken with as a peer navigator often get confused with whether they're receiving one or the other, and we can identify which one it is based on how much they're getting. But what is that range between those two resources, so that people can get an idea of how substantial this help really can be in their lives?
Sure. So for SSI, it's pretty easy. There's a federal benefit rate that's set every year. It's currently $967 a month. So if you're SSI recipient and you're receiving the maximum benefit, it's $967 a month. That's for an individual. The couple rate is currently $1,450, I believe. And then for SSDI, of course, it's based on your wage record, right? So they do have a federal benefit maximum rate. I don't know the current maximum rate, but it's from all sources of benefits that you receive. You cannot earn over this maximum threshold. But I think the highest benefit rate I ever saw as a disability advocate was $2,700 a month on SSDI, something like that.
The highest I've ever seen is like 3,300.
Okay, yeah. So exactly. I haven't taken a case in 10 years. So,
and that was a spinal surgeon making set over $1 million.
Oh, I was going to say, and he was probably a very well paid doctor or otherwise entrepreneur making a lot of money, right? So that's kind of the range, a little under 1,000 on SSI only, and upwards of 3,000 if you have a legitimate job and you've worked it consistently for years with no breaks.
I think Joe Biden makes about $3,000 or something in his Social Security. Something to that effect. I looked up.
That would be. I feel like that would be true.
Yep, it would go in line with a presidential salary and a senator or congressman's salary.
Right.
Is there a minimum for either of those? Minimum benefit?
Yeah, zero. Exactly. Truly, I mean, we laugh. That is a true answer. So yeah, like we mentioned earlier, SSI, not only is subject to those asset limits, but also on the back end, once you get approved for benefits, they can look at any support that you've been receiving from a family member or friend and consider it in-kind support and maintenance. So that they call them the ISM rules, but basically they can reduce your benefit because of help that you're receiving from a family member or friend. So if you're allowed to live somewhere rent-free, if you're, if somebody's buying your groceries, all of those sorts of things. Although I think that there might be a new rule about
they changed the food stuff.
Yeah, eliminating the food.
Yep.
But all that to say, it was not uncommon for us to see SSI eligible individuals get a 1/3 reduction in their benefit. So 1/3 of 967, you're in the 600s, right? That's not a lot of money to live on every month in 2025. And then, the same is true for Social Security disability. One piece of that's important to know is that they're going to track what they call a date last insured, right? And so your date last insured is indicative of when you last worked enough to be considered eligible for benefits. And it does push forward. So, I think it's 5 years, right? From the last day you worked and earned a quarter of coverage. But you have to be found disabled according to their definition of disability before your DLI, before your day last insured, in order to be considered eligible for those cash benefits. So It's clear as mud. I'm sure as we just sit here and talk about it and have no actual like PowerPoint to look at. So again, all the more reason why it's just super important if you're in this process to seek help.
And I always like to say this, Eva and Ryan, that I work with a young man who, for all intents and purposes, is a rocket scientist. Whatever the neurospace, whatever, he's a rocket scientist. He cannot navigate this on his own. So I always tell people that so they don't feel bad about not being able to figure this out.
Right. And I think that's really true. When I was taking cases, I learned something new every single day.
Yes. I learned a lot new today from you guys.
Well, same, I mean, there's things that you just can't possibly know it all. I mean, it's governed by the Code of Federal Regulations, right? When we took our eligible for direct pay fee exam, when I took it in 2011, we had an actual printed copy of the Code of Federal Regulations, and it was open book. But does it help if the book is 4 inches thick? Like, you have to know where to go to find the answer, right? And so again, there have been a few reps along the way, attorneys and reps along the way that I've met that I'm like, man, they're like an encyclopedia. They can just call it right from their brain. And I went and took that test, and I thought, I'm looking up every single one, even if I think I know it, because why am I going to pay this money to come test, have an open book, and not look it up? So it's just a lot of information.
Oh my gosh. As the saying needs that chatbot.
And then there's also the interpretation. How is it interpreted?
Yeah.
In lieu of that, everyone listening, you think you will need Social Security, which you probably will, or if you're interested in SSI or SSDI benefits, please reach out to Spinalpedia or the National Association of Disability Representatives to get the support that you absolutely need to enroll and navigate these systems. Any last words before we close the episode that you think are important to leave people with?
If it's okay with you, I'd just like to say on air our telephone referral service line phone number, in case somebody just wants to jot it down and give us a buzz. We were happy to connect you with somebody. So the National Association of Disability Representative telephone referral service phone number is 1-800-747-6131. Thank you, guys.
Fantastic.
And if you are interested in going back to work, or already have a job or job offer, and you need help understanding, and you're on disability and or SSI and need help understanding how work is going to affect that along with your Medicaid, contact me, Heather Miller at Spinalpedia. It's just Heather, HEATHER, at spinalpedia.com. It's like encyclopedia, but spinalpedia.com. Or you can reach out to Jonathan or Corey as well, and they can get you in touch with me.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
That was fantastic. Heather got me through the Ticket to Work program, and everything worked fine. But in truth, the words fear came up, and the company, ended up kind of entering, not the company, but like their area entering into a war, right? And so these are the things you fear to be able to want to get off of the program, because you long to work and you want to make as much money as you possibly can. But unforeseen occurrences do happen. And so anybody that's viewing and watching, that's the point in the social safety net, is for you to take advantage of it, because all of us are susceptible and capable of slipping through the cracks one way or the other. And, it's also important to have a plan in place so that, you create a nest egg so you can retire and live comfortably as much as you can. Social Security can help supplement those things, but it is not the end all be all. But in order to navigate it, you have wonderful people like Eva, Ryan, Heather, and myself and John to get you through that process. So, ladies, thank you so much for joining and participating in our Morning Walking video podcast discussion. You guys are awesome.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And stay tuned in and sign up for the More Than Walking newsletter at morethanwalking.com to learn about the topic we will cover next and how you can participate. Also, like, comment, and subscribe to our More Than Walking YouTube channel to watch each podcast. And we'll be dropping new episodes every week. Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for More Than Walking or Super Adaptables.
Absolutely. And until then, remain encouraged, stay hopeful, and above all else,
keep adapting.